Hey guys, what's up? I'm Alvin and welcome to our very first Onemoreweektogo Q&A. Wait, Q&A? I thought you make trip reports. So, I'll tell you why I'm making a Q&A. If you haven't noticed, I haven't been uploading for the past month or two, and that's because I have no more trip reports to make. Because of COVID-19, we're all stuck at home, not traveling, but as a result, I've run out of content. So basically I thought, now would be a good time to do a Q&A. You guys have had a lot of questions about my aviation photography, about how I make my trip reports. So I asked you guys for questions from my Instagram channel and through YouTube, and you guys submitted a whole bunch of questions. Thanks for that. I probably won't have time to go through all of them, just to make sure I keep this video to a reasonable length. But I'll try to answer as many as I can. I'll answer all the important ones and some of the interesting ones. And hopefully by the end of this video, you'll have a better idea of who is Alvin, who is the guy behind the camera making all these videos, taking all these photos. Hopefully the next time you watch my trip report, you'll remember this video and relate to it a bit more, since you will hopefully know me better as a person. Rest assured that once we can all start traveling again, I'll be back in the air and making these trip reports that you originally subscribed to me for. So without further ado, let's roll the intro and get right into the questions. Alright, let's start off with an easy one, asked by Aviation Harley. What is your favorite aircraft and airline? Easy answer for me, my favorite airline would have to be ANA, All Nippon Airways, Japanese carrier. And my favorite aircraft, it's actually kind of a tie between the 777 and the Airbus A350. I think they're both amazing aircraft. Obviously the A350 is a lot newer, a lot more comfortable to fly in. But the 777, I just love the sound of those GE90 engines, so I'm gonna have to give it to the 777 in this case. Okay, this is a question asked by Heroes.aviation. Obviously, this is the question he'll ask. What makes ANA so good? So this is kind of a follow-up to the previous question where I said ANA is my favorite airline. So if you've ever flown with ANA, you kind of see where I'm coming from. The service that you receive is just, I think it's incomparable to any other airline. Obviously, they have that Japanese hospitality going for them. Every detail is considered. The crew are some of the friendliest you'll ever meet in the skies. Their food is amazing. Maybe just because I personally love Japanese food, I'm always excited to eat when I'm on an ANA flight. Another reason I love them is how clean their aircraft are. If you ever have the chance, definitely go give ANA a try. Highly recommend them as an airline. Question asked by YVR Leisure Spotter. Any advice on how to earn miles strategically for flight redemptions? Now, if you don't know, a lot of the premium travel that I do in business class and first class, majority of the time I don't pay cash for these flights. I use credit card points and frequent flyer miles to redeem them. You might have heard about it, but you're probably not sure how it works. But basically, you can use credit cards to rack up points. You can also earn points through flying. The whole idea is you earn miles and you can redeem them to travel in either economy class, business class, or first class instead of using actual cash to purchase. It turns out that there are some pretty cheap ways to use them to redeem for premium class travel that makes it actually quite affordable to fly more comfortably for the same price that you would pay if you were to just buy an economy ticket, for example. I won't go into the details. That can be like a whole 2-hour video on its own. So here are a few things that I would do to earn miles faster or more strategically. So first of all, definitely put all your spending on credit cards if you can. Don't use cash if you can help it. Always pay with that credit card. Don't use debit cards either. You'd be surprised if even for small purchases like $1 or $2, just tap it on your credit card. I don't know why it's there's a thing where people think if it's such a small amount, like $1 or $2 transaction, they think it's, I don't know, is it rude to pay with a credit card or it's inconvenient? But actually the cashier is probably thanking you for using a credit card because they don't have to handle cash or give you change or anything. Any spending you can put on a credit card, put it on a credit card. Take advantage of the sign-up promotions whenever possible. Credit cards offer promotions, to earn a certain number of points when you sign up for their credit card and maybe spend a certain amount. Definitely try to take advantage of those and maximize your earnings from those, from sign-up bonuses. Make sure when you're flying at that frequent flyer number so that you can earn miles for your flight. And finally, diversify. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, they say, so don't just focus on earning one type of mileage program. It's good to have at least like 2 or 3 that you can diversify your points into. You never know when one program might suddenly devalue. If you had put everything in that program, your miles would be worth significantly less now. You know, if you need to fly on different airlines, those may require different points to be able to redeem them. So definitely try to have at least 2 or 3 mileage programs. So a question asked by Matthews Aviation, the most interesting place you have ever been? It's a good question. Probably the most interesting or coolest place that's related to aviation that I've been to is St. Martin. It's that little island in the Caribbean that a lot of cruise ships go to, where like one side is French and one side is the Netherlands, I believe. They have this really cool one runway airport, large aircraft like the 747 or the A340. They come in super low over the beach. It's called Maho Beach, and they touch down just past the fence. And so a lot of people go there to plane spot and to kind of experience the thrill of these loud jets just flying right over top. And I've been there a couple years ago. It's really cool. It's kind of touristy, but it's a cool spot. Definitely worth checking out if you're an aviation geek. Any advice for YouTube startups? This is a question asked by Austin Jets. Sometimes I feel unqualified to answer this question because I'm not like a huge channel or anything. I only have about like 8,000 subscribers. So, you know, take what I say with that in context. But I think one of the most important things for a successful YouTuber, focus on making good quality content. That's kind of like the foundation of it all. You need to have good content for people to want to watch in the first place and to subscribe and to continue watching in the future. They will associate good quality video with something that might be useful or valuable. Another thing to keep in mind is to make videos that you would want to watch yourself. The fact that you would want to watch your own videos is a good indicator of whether someone else would want to watch that video. Personally, like, I make my trip reports to a level that I would love going back and revisiting my trips through my own trip reports. Another tip that I learned was that make sure you have good audio. Instead of just using that onboard microphone on your camera, which most of the time is crap quality, invest in like a cheap external microphone that you can put on top of your DSLR, or have one of those lav mics that you can attach to your shirt. Those pick up voice much better and gets rid of a lot of the ambient background noise. Oh, and another thing is like, don't watch your subscriber count on a day-to-day basis. It will drive you crazy. Like, it's good to look at your statistics and and find out what's working and what's not. Chances are it'll take a lot of work and take a lot of time for you to actually grow that number. You know, if you're just putting out that good quality content, you will see that number rise over time. Question asked by Spotter from Hungary. What is your favorite airport? I might be biased in saying this, but my favorite airport would have to be YVR, Vancouver International Airport. Probably it's my favorite because I live here. Okay, so first of all, let me qualify this a bit. It's my favorite airport to do aviation photography at. You know, having visited a lot of other airports around the world, they all have really cool traffic, really cool airlines, different aircraft. Like places like Los Angeles or Heathrow, they have aircraft coming in like every minute. But I think one of the coolest things about YVR is our scenery, our backdrops. You know, if you look at my photos on my Instagram, a lot of my photos try to highlight that beauty of YVR in my photos. So try to take advantage of that. That's one of the main reasons why it's my favorite. It's not all the time you can see like mountain ranges or ocean in the background of aviation photos. So I think that natural beauty around YVR lets us take really cool photographs from here, and that's kind of the main reasons why it's one of my favorite airports. Oh man, that was a lot of questions. Question asked by Chris Aviation. Which camera gearbox do you recommend to people who don't have a lot of money? Now, I personally don't know too much about specific camera models. I'm using a Sony right now, and I've been using Sony for the past couple of years, so I don't really know about the Sony lineups and the Sony lenses. If you're someone who's looking for a camera to just get started into aviation photography, just pick up like a cheap crop sensor Canon or Nikon and pair it with like a 75 to 300 millimeter lens. I think that would be a really good starter kit for someone who's just getting into it. If you're looking to do like video work and stuff, get like a wide angle, like a 16-35 or a 12-24. You don't have to go fancy with your camera gear to start making good videos. It's a common myth that a lot of people fall for. People see really nice pictures and then the first question they jump to is, whoa, what camera are you using, or like what lens are you using? And I find that that is kind of the wrong mentality to have. You can get really nice photos or really nice videos with a cheap camera. And there's a lot of examples of this on YouTube, like of people demonstrating this. I don't have any specific model recommendations, but I'd say like look for a Canon or Nikon crop sensor body. Those tend to be cheaper than the full frames. And pair it with like an 18-200 or 75-300 millimeter lens. Have a drink. Okay, question asked by Ethan, SQ_aviation Gilly. What is your favorite Asian dish / food? My favorite Asian dish? You're really gonna make me choose. My favorite Asian dish would have to be, okay, can I just say like a genre of, like a genre of Asian food? I really like Asian noodle soup. So anything that is like soup based, like wonton noodles, dandan noodles, or like laksa, just like heaven food for me. Drink wise, you know, just going back to my classic Hong Kong roots. I really like cold lemon tea, or like Hong Kong style lemon tea, or milk tea. If you're talking about like airline, I don't, so here's the thing, I don't drink alcohol at all. If you watch my trip reports, you may have noticed this. I cannot drink alcohol. It's not that I can't, I mean, yeah, technically I can't, in the sense that if I do, my throat starts to constrict. I turn like a cherry red. I get like an instant headache. So I just don't drink alcohol. I feel like I have a bit of an allergic reaction to it, but I have never tested it, so I'm not gonna claim that I do, but that's what it feels like. So my favorite non-alcoholic drink on an airline would have to be Cathay Pacific's Cathay Delight. Cathay Delight. Every time I go on a Cathay Pacific flight, it's like a must to order this drink. And sometimes they don't have it, so it's like super upsetting. So RJ Aviation asks, what are some interests outside of traveling, aviation, and photography? So outside of aviation, if I'm not editing photos, if I'm not editing videos, if I'm not out at the airport taking pictures of airplanes, you'll find me at the movie theater. I really like watching movies, going out for a coffee. Used to be a huge like PC gamer, not so much anymore, but I do enjoy the occasional video game. Another side that you may or may not know about me is I'm really into music production and singing actually. So before I got into aviation photography, I did like YouTube covers of songs. I would write my own music and record vocals and things like that. I don't do that as much anymore. You know, if you search around, you might be able to find my old YouTube singing cover or song cover channel. That's all I'm gonna say on that. Okay, question asked by Not a Travel Blogger. And this is a pretty common question. Tips on post-processing. So I'm assuming this means like post-processing in terms of editing aviation photos. So I do get a lot of questions about how do I edit my photos, how do I make it look this certain way. Personally, I like really colorful photos. I like photos that just pop. One way to do that is to make use of masking, utilize layers, utilize brushing techniques. Different elements in your photo may require different amounts of editing. So one trick is to do something called selective editing, where you may do a certain edit on the plane, while on the background you may do a different type of edit, and then you layer that together into one final image. If you're doing like heavy editing, which I tend to do, there's going to be like artifacts that are created around the gears, the wingtips, the engines. This typically happens when you have a really high contrast edge between the plane and the background. So make sure you clean up those artifacts and those halos that tend to form if you heavily edit your photos. There's nothing that really kind of ruins that whole professional look and that high quality look than if you have these artifacts showing up. No matter how nicely you have edited the colors, or you may have made the reflections come out really nicely on the plane, but when you see those artifacts and those little imperfections, that really just kind of spoils the whole photo. So make sure that if you're gonna do that heavy editing, make sure to clean up your canvas, basically. Okay, a question asked by Delta Bravo Tango. How many rewards programs are you currently in? So let's see, I am part of Aeroplan, Alaska Mileage. I have some miles in American Advantage, some miles in Life Miles, which is Avianca's frequent flyer program. I have a ton of Amex membership rewards, a lot of Hilton points, Hilton Honors points for hotels, and also some Marriott points, Marriott Bonvoy. So I have, a good number of points that I can use in different scenarios. And that's one thing, like I mentioned this earlier, but make sure to diversify your points. You don't want to put all your points into like one program, and then if something happens to that program, maybe they change the rules, change the booking policies, then you're kind of screwed over. You want to diversify so that you have other options to book other airlines if you need to. Another question asked by Victor, do you have any plans on becoming a pilot? So I do, just a private pilot license at this point. I did used to want to become a commercial pilot and fly for Cathay Pacific. I think that was kind of the original pilot dream that I had, was to fly for Cathay Pacific and go through their cadet program. But life happens, different things got in the way. I'm happy with my current situation, so I would be happy just getting a private license that I can fly on my own time as a hobby and not make it part of my career. Here's a good question. How did you get started into aviation photography and filmography? So let's talk about photography first. I started getting into aviation photography in about 2016. End of 2016. I've been fascinated by airplanes since much longer than that. Like as a little kid, I remember I was always excited to go on planes. I would also always be looking skyward at planes flying through the air. But in terms of actually taking photos of them, that didn't start till relatively recently, 2016. I think I was riding my bike past the airport. I had my camera in the backpack, and I just decided to stop and take some photos of airplanes. From that point, I started getting more into it. I started learning how to edit my photos. People really seemed to like it, so it kind of snowballed from there, and I developed my skills as an aviation photographer, and from there it became a much more serious a passion of mine. In terms of doing like videos, that didn't start till about 2 years after that. So in 2018, I think my first trip report was actually on Cathay's A350 flight from Vancouver to Hong Kong. I decided to make a video out of that, and that was how the trip report started. I think the original intention of the trip reports was for my own sake, that I could go back and relive the experience and remember what happened on the flight. I tend to have a really bad memory, so I don't remember exactly what happened on a previous flight. One way for me to combat that is to actually record it down through video, and that's how all the trip reports started. Okay, so this next question, I got several like this, but I'm just asked in different ways. But basically the question is, what made me start my Instagram account? Or what made me start my YouTube channel? Like, to be honest, both my Instagram page and my YouTube channel started as an add-on to my travel blog website, which is Onemoreweektogo.com. My original intention was to make travel reviews and blog posts that I could put on that website, and the Instagram channel and the YouTube channel were just kind of supplementary to that. I think over time I found that I enjoyed the more visual aspect, which was the photography, the videos, and so I just kind of naturally moved my focus. And so yeah, that was kind of the original intention of starting those channels. What does One More Week to Go mean? Yeah, this is a good question. A lot of people had this question as well. It was kind of like a phrase that I always said whenever I was looking forward to a trip. I would say like, oh, there's like 1 more week to go until we fly to so-and-so. After saying that so many times, when I was coming up with names for the account, I just kind of said it as a joke that, oh, why don't we just name it 1 More Week to Go? This is what we always say when we go traveling. It just kind of had a certain ring to it after listening to it a few times, and it ended up being the name for the channel. Alright, easy question. Where were you born? I was born in Hong Kong. Can you speak in your mother tongue? 係可以嘅，我係其實識廣東話。香港出世咧，我係第一個語言我係學嘅就係廣東話啦。咁我2歲過咗嚟加拿大之後，我先至開始學英文嘅。There's your proof that I know how to speak in my mother tongue. I probably have an accent if you're like a native Cantonese speaker. Have you ever considered turning your photography into a full-fledged business? So short answer is yes. Have I thought about it? Yes. It has crossed my mind that if I can turn photography, which is something I love doing, into a full-fledged business that I can that I can dedicate all my time into it, and I can make a decent living off of it, you know, it's something that I would love to do. But there are a lot of factors to think about. How many different revenue streams are you going to have? Is it going to be a stable enough income? Are you going to be able to keep the same standard of living doing photography as your primary career rather than doing it as a side business? I think at this point, it's still not at a point where I can even consider going full-time with it. It's definitely something that I just enjoy doing on the side. I'm happy doing it on the side. It's something that I can use to fill up my free time and feel productive. Aside from my career, I can still build up something that I like doing on the side. Is there a full track of the music you use in your vlog intros for download? With the exception of the 1 More Week to Go jingle that you hear as part of my intro video, all the music that you hear in my trip reports and in my vlogs are all from a website called Epidemic Sound. Epidemic Sound is basically a subscription-based music library that you can use to find any sound effects or any song that you would like to use in your videos. And the great thing is that using these songs, you can still monetize your videos and you don't have to worry about any copyright claims. All your music can be safely monetized, and they have over, I don't even know how many songs they have, but like tens of thousands, if not more, songs and sound effects, and more are being added every day. I highly recommend you go check that out and give it a try. I do have a referral link in my description below. If you do decide to go check it out, please use my referral link, and if you do end up subscribing, I do get a small kickback that goes towards my own Epidemic Sound monthly subscription fee. If you're interested, I would highly appreciate if you can use my link and go check it out. The question asked by Aviation Tommy, how can you improve your photography? You know, there's kind of two parts to it, right? There's the photography part, which is everything that happens before and during the actual taking of the photo. And then there's everything that happens after that, which is the post-production, the editing, yeah, basically the editing. You know, you kind of have to have both, right? You can take the photo, it might be a great photo, but then you need to edit it so that you bring out that same mood, that same atmosphere in real life. Normally, you see things with your two eyes. You see a lot more of what's around you. You have more context, more perspective of everything. You have added senses such as your smell, your hearing. All of that that adds to the emotions behind that photograph. So a lot of those senses you need to substitute by bringing that in through your editing. So that's a long way of saying you need to focus on both aspects. Obviously, you need to become a better photographer in terms of understanding your camera, your aperture, your shutter speed, ISO, and how all that works together. You need to master your gear, basically. So a lot of that is just practice, practice, practice. Go out and shoot more often in different scenarios and see what works, see what doesn't. And from there, once you have a good photograph, a good raw image that, oh yes, always shoot in raw. Yeah, that's kind of like the #1 golden rule. And then from there, once you bring it into the computer, there's a lot of things you can learn and do with editing. So in terms of editing, YouTube is a great resource for learning this. Personally, I learned everything that I know about editing from YouTube. There's a lot of good material on there that teaches you different techniques of how to edit. You'll slowly learn, what works for you and what doesn't, what looks good and what might not look good. So to summarize all that, there's really 2 parts. You want to focus on the technique about taking a good photograph and also learn different post-processing techniques to be able to bring out that magic in that photograph. Dream gear setup. So actually I'm pretty happy with what I have right now. I've been using the Sony a7 III, which actually I'm filming this video with right now. It's a great camera, great mirrorless full frame camera, and I recently upgraded to the a7 R4, which has 61 megapixels. No shortage of pixels there, so it's awesome for being able to crop in a lot on it and still have really high resolution to work with. One of my favorite lenses is this 70-200 lens, f2.8. It's a Sony lens, and I love using this thing. Just the speed and how sharp it is. It's just a really great lens. It's a great size. The build quality is just superb, so I love this lens. The other lens that I use for getting a bit more reach is the 200-600 Sony. Relatively new lens that Sony released. It's a variable aperture 5.6 to 6.3, but this is also a really great lens, super fast on the autofocus. In my experience, not quite as sharp as the 70-200, but still really nice lens to use. It's a pain to travel with this thing though, because it's quite heavy, but necessary if I'm gonna be doing aviation photography. The lens that you can't see right now is the one I'm filming this video on. Is the 1635 f4. That's a great lens for video work or any wide angle photography. The low light performance on this thing is amazing. If you have seen some of my videos in a dark cabin or a night wing view, you can see some examples of this lens and how it performs in the dark. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with the gear that I have now. It's getting really hot in this room. Here's another question that I get quite a bit. What made you pick Sony over the other camera brands? So one of the major reasons I picked Sony was for work like this, video work. At the time that I switched to Sony, Sony was way further ahead in video technology than the competition. Their low light performance is amazing. You can see that from their A7S or A7S II cameras. To me, Sony was just a company that was really innovative, and they were really pushing the bounds of camera technology, and every iteration of cameras that they were coming out with were quite significant. For me, when I switched, the a7 III had just come out, and for the price of the a7 III, it was comparable to the flagships at Canon or Nikon. To me, it just seemed like a no-brainer to get into Sony and see what they had to offer. Do you play X-Plane 11? So yes, I do, but I am gonna be honest, I am terrible at that game. Mostly because I haven't played it enough. Had been playing a lot recently, flying the Zibo Mod 737. I was getting the hang of it, being able to bring it up from a cold start, turning on the engines properly, taxiing out, setting up all the FMC and stuff. I've been trying to get into a bit more. I do like playing flight sims. I'm super excited for the new one coming out, the Microsoft's new flight simulator. Can't wait until that one comes out. Definitely gonna be buying that. Another question that I get a lot, especially from my Instagram page, people really wanna know how I got to editing the way that I do, where I learned it. I never took any classes or anything. Everything was learned through experimentation on my own and through YouTube. YouTube is your friend here in terms of learning how to use Photoshop, learning how to use Lightroom, the techniques around editing. Another great way to learn about editing and expand your own technique is actually to edit with your friends or edit with others who have a similar passion as you. I've edited with others such as Photo Rohan on Instagram or Etop's Exposure on Instagram, and they're both really great editors. They have their own styles that are different than mine, but just by like editing with them, you know, just go on like a Skype call or like FaceTime or whatever you use and just watch the way that they edit and their technique. Just sharing these tips and of how to do certain things in a better way. That really helped push my editing ability to the next level, I think. It's not about like stealing their workflow and copying it, but it's more about taking bits and pieces of different workflows and coming up with something that works for you, that helps you create your own style, not just trying to copy the look of someone else. How to get started as a plane spotter and be professional like you. So first off, I don't consider myself a professional. Definitely still have a lot of things to learn. To get started as a plane spotter, you really just need to have a basic entry-level DSLR and like a decent telephoto lens. That's really all you need, and just go to the airport and start taking pictures of airplanes. You really don't need a whole lot of gear or equipment to start having fun and taking photos of airplanes. How has aviation photography affected your life? It definitely has had a profound impact on my life in a good way. You know, in the past I would spend a lot of my free time playing video games, but now I spend a lot more of that time editing photos, videos, just feel a lot more productive with my time. I feel like I'm building something that will have a lasting impact on me, rather than if I was just playing video games all day. Like sure, I might be having a lot of fun, but am I really adding any more value to myself and improving myself as an individual? And through aviation photography, I've met a lot of people that I would consider as lifelong friends, just because we shared the same passion in taking photos of airplanes. We were able to connect at that level and turn that into like a friendship that will last outside of the realm of aviation photography. And I think that's really cool, and that's something I particularly like about this hobby. You know, sometimes I take trips for the sake of going to an airport to take photos, like my trips down to LAX, or my trip to Toronto, or my trip to Atlanta. Those are all trips that were purely fueled on the fact that I wanted to go to another airport to take photos. It's not just photos, there's certain flights that I wanted to take just because I wanted to make a video of that flight, such as the ANA A380 inaugural. Basically, it's like a creative outlet for me. So there's a question asked by Vicarious Voyager, and you probably know him. He's, in my opinion, one of the best trip reporters out there currently. Check out his channel, Vicarious Voyager. But he asks, how do you film with so much equipment? I see you have 4 cameras, multiple lenses, and that black toilet plunger reflection removing device. So a little bit of context. I met Vicarious Voyager on the inaugural Air Canada A220 flight from Montreal to Calgary. At that time, he saw me running around with like my Sony GoPro and like an Insta360 camera. And also I had the, I don't know if I can show you. So this is the black toilet plunger reflection removing device that he's referring to. And yeah, I mean, I'll give him credit, it kind of looks like that. Basically what this does is you put this over your camera lens, and this lets you kind of like provide a seal around the lens and the window. It kind of cuts out all the glare and reflections that can be induced by like from light sources. This is really useful in airport terminals, the cabin when you want to shoot outside. cuts out a lot of that lighting glare and makes your photo all gross. But yeah, that's what he's talking about. To answer the question, how do I film with all that equipment? Most of the time, I am mostly just using one camera, which is the one I'm filming with now. And I would have the GoPro that I would use for like secondary B-roll shots sometimes, but basically the GoPro would be for like wing view shots, or if I'm walking around and I need to put it on a gimbal. You know, I've bought a Insta360, played around with that for a couple of like creative shots. I do carry a couple lenses. I do carry the 16-35mm and the 70-200mm back there. That's for more like B-roll shots where I want to get, you know, zoom, punch in closer to the subject. The vlogging and like the cabin videos, mostly using just the 16-35 on the A7. Here's a question: is Instagram your main focus now? So I think what this question is asking, like, is Instagram more of my focus, or is the YouTube more of my focus? So no, Instagram is not my main focus. It may seem that way right now because of my lack of content and my lack of uploads on YouTube. But actually I've been trying to shift more of my focus onto YouTube, focus on putting out better videos, higher quality videos, and hopefully I can start doing that once we start traveling again. But actually that has been my intention, was to shift my focus more from Instagram to YouTube. So here's an interesting one. Where do you get your inspiration for video editing? If you've watched my trip reports, you might notice that it's a little bit different from other trip reports. I try to incorporate more of a cinematic feel to my videos. The standard trip report style is kind of showing the authentic experience, the raw footage and the raw sounds. But for my videos, I try to incorporate a bit more cinematography into it. You know, I do a lot of cutscenes and B-roll and slow-mo. A lot of that inspiration comes from watching filmmakers like Peter McKinnon, Maddie Poya, people like that who are more like travel vloggers slash filmmakers slash photographers. I try to, you know, have a fusion between filmmaking and travel vlogging. If you've seen my videos, that's kind of like what I'm going for. That's my inspiration to how I make my trip reports. How do you edit your photos and color grade your videos? So I edit my photos in Photoshop, mostly Photoshop. You know, I import it into Lightroom first to do some basic light adjustments like exposure, blacks and whites, and shadows and highlights. And then most of the heavy lifting, I do that in Photoshop, like all the masking, the layers, the color work. In terms of my video editing, I do that in Adobe Premiere. I also use After Effects to help with some animations, some graphics. I also have been using Adobe Audition to help with the sound mixing and the sound leveling. So yeah, basically the whole Adobe suite. In terms of color grading, I do like light color correction in my videos. Usually I just apply like a light preset, like a preset lux, to have a consistent style across my videos. I don't really go too fancy into the color grading. Are there two people behind the channel? Yes, there are. Peterson is the one that, you know, he's kind of more behind the scenes. He likes looking up the flights, looking up all the itineraries, booking the flights, playing around with all the points programs and figuring out how to maximize our points to get the best flights possible. Like, that's kind of his thing. Once that part is all figured out, then I come in and do all the video work, the trip reports, and the photography. That's kind of like my area. That is all the mental capacity I have to answer questions, and I'm going to close out the Q&A. So there were some questions I didn't get to purely because we're running out of time. Hopefully this video is not going to be too long. I didn't answer some questions because a lot of them were similar to the ones I already answered, and some of them were just a bit weird and either too philosophical or too deep, or I simply didn't have an answer to them. If you're still watching this, thank you so much for staying. It means a lot, and thank you for listening to me talk about myself for so long. Hopefully you learned something new about me as a person, and hopefully you found something you can relate to. And when you're watching the next report, you can put a more familiar face to that voice behind the voiceover in my trip reports. Definitely, I will be back to doing my regular trip reports once we can all start traveling again. Those are definitely not going away, so stay tuned for that. While you're waiting for those, I encourage you to check out some of my previous trip reports, some of the recent ones I've made. I'll link some of my favorite ones in the description below. I encourage you to check those out if you haven't already. So until next time, thanks for watching, stay safe and healthy, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya. You want to say hi to the camera? Hey, no, come here. Stand, sit. Oh, good boy, look. Look at that. Who's that? Who is this? Who is that? No, come here. Yes, good boy. Good boy. Say hi. You're on YouTube. You're on YouTube, Bravo. This is Bravo. This is everyone, Bravo. Speak. Good boy. Good boy.